Hello adventurers, welcome back to the Red Quills for another video on creating and updating fantasy maps for your campaigns and stories. It's been 6 months since we started this channel and we have had such an incredible surge of support from the fantasy loving community. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you all. I will continue to bring you videos, tutorials, ideas, lore dumps and everything and anything that I can get my hands on to level up your fantasy cartography experience. So this week, we're having a little look back on some of the styles that I've drawn out for the previous videos. We've created 24 maps for this channel so far, and while they started with the standard high fantasy style, we've gone to strange new worlds and methods to find a different spin to give to your maps. And today, we're going to rate the top 10 map styles we've exhibited on the channel. These styles range from the meticulously detailed to the beautifully abstract, each with its own unique flair and utility for your fantasy campaigns. I'm going to be showcasing them, talking a little bit about how I achieved the effects, and then rating them based on their aesthetics, their difficulty in reproducing, and their usefulness for the GM or the players. Finally, I'll give them a score. So, settle in and get ready for a quick crash course in all the best ways to style your fantasy maps. We're going to start at the bottom of the list and the bottom of the sea floor and rise from there. That's with our recent map of the ruins of Dothair. This one is a topographical city map and the final effect was pretty much exactly what I was going for. For a little background on the map itself, the ruins are the remains of an ancient but highly advanced civilization. My intention was to create a map that gave that feeling of futuristic technology, but still maintaining the content of being fantastical and, of course, subnautical. It's a topographical map which uses lines at different thicknesses to show elevation, or in this case, the depth from the surface. To make it more aesthetic, I used watercolors to paint the shadows of the rocky bottom and the crumbling skyscrapers to give an added three-dimensional feeling. So let's get into rating it. For its aesthetic, I think that it looks really nice, but it is a little niche. I also combined the idea with the Naturalist sketches in the borders, which I think in retrospect might have detracted from the overall vibe. I'll have to come back to it and try again, but until then, I would say that its aesthetic is medium. In terms of how difficult it is to reproduce, I would say that it's also a medium. The lines themselves for the topography aren't all that difficult, but I would warn you that if you're attempting it, to start from a higher elevation and work your way down and keep them all straight, which can be a little bit of a headache. The shadows actually help me with that. Finally, for its usefulness, I would also give it a medium. It's a little bit of a toss-up because it's not as useful as it could be for the game master themselves, but you could definitely make one of these, give it a bit of wear and tear, and then hand it to the players as an ancient but futuristic map that leads to a technological artifact. So overall, I'd give this map a 6 out of 10. It's got some strong ideas, but it's a little specific. Let's head on over to number 9 on our list, the beloved map of Heartwood in the Halfling Boroughs. Now, I got a lot of really good feedback from this one. This video has a high rewatch rate, and I think that it's really nailed the feeling of wistfulness, the peaceful ambience, that out in the dales look that I was going for. So, talking about the style itself for a moment, this map is in the Wainwright style, which I talk about a little in the video itself. Alfred Wainwright was an English fell walker who made painstaking sketches of the walking paths and tracks through the beautiful British countryside. For the halflings, who represent the idealized countryside dwellers, I thought that it definitely suited. Alfred Wainwright and his maps also had a big hand in getting me started making maps too when I was a young bushwalker, so it's a homage to a great cartographer. It's a very specific style, but it's got a lot going for it. But let's get to the scoring and I'll talk about it a little bit more. The aesthetics of this map are absolutely gorgeous. They're different from the top-down maps, they're striking, and they're definitely immersive. If you handed this map to someone and told them that it was a village just up the valley, their feeling of immersion, their ability to imagine it would go through the roof. So I put the aesthetic as high. That being said, it's not a simple style, and it takes a practiced eye. The scale is variable because it's a perspective view, so you need to be able to clearly picture what the countryside looks like to get an accurate map. I also use watercolors to shade the hillsides, which looks great, but used a lot of paint and took a lot of time. The difficulty is going to make this one more of a challenge to beginners, so I'll set it at high. And finally, let's talk about the usefulness. It's a great map, it's extremely immersive, and it has that going for it, but the map only covers a relatively small area, and that's great if you're creating a map for a one-shot, but not necessarily for a full campaign. And because it's another specific style, I'll put that at medium. Overall, I love it. But it's not a bread and butter kind of map. It's hard to make, it's specific to use. I'd hang it over my fireplace, but I couldn't write a 60-hour adventure based entirely within it. Or maybe I could. You're not my dad. Alright, let's get back a little bit further now to the one that I'm still quite proud of. This is the illustrated dungeon map of the Still Beating Heart from my video, World Building Dungeons. I got a bit of feedback in the comments from this one about how you wouldn't be able to use such a map in your fantasy campaign, but I want to take this opportunity to say that I actually did. It's a location in the campaign that I'm currently running at the moment, and it was awesome. It's a highly detailed illustration, and it only uses ink. I've used 4 thicknesses of black fine liner to create the outlines, the details, the textures, and finally the shading through the tunnels and caverns, and of course the city buildings above and the heart itself. So without further ado, let's score it. Aesthetically, I love it. It's a great map, and you could stick this in a book to show the reader what to picture, or bang it up on your wall as a trophy. It's striking, it's detailed, and it makes the location memorable. It's definitely only worth doing if there is a striking visual to communicate, like the giant heart here. I'd give it a high. Its difficulty, though, is a lot. It certainly took me a long time, and even if you're methodical about it, drawing out the shapes in pencil first, measuring all the distances to maintain a consistent scale, it takes a good eye. So that's very high. And finally, its usefulness. Yes, it's specific. Yes, it's not something that you can use for a full campaign. I still love it. You can prize it away from my cold, dead hands. I'm giving it a medium because I used it despite the haters. Overall, I give this map a 6.5 out of 10. Good, but not great, I guess. Fine. Moving on. Alright, now we're getting to the good stuff. This map of the Drifting Isle was my first Naturalists map. It was extremely popular compared to my other early videos, and I enjoyed it so much that I made a whole series of Naturalist maps to really sink my teeth into the concept. This map was another one that I used in my own current campaign. The idea was that the players had found the isle floating through the high seas. It's the body of an elder god, and its ambient magic caused the flora and fauna inhabiting it to change. So a Naturalist's map with sketches of those changed creatures was the perfect, obvious choice. I'm still attached to the Naturalist map style. I've done 7 more since then though, and I'm probably going to put it down now for a while because I know what a hyper-focus looks like when I see it, but let's rate it. Its aesthetics, high. So cool, very immersive, quite cool. It's beautiful, you could put it up on your wall. It's cool, and there's heaps of details to look at. You could find quite a lot of Easter eggs and references that I put in there. It's cool, and there are more than a few clues to later plot points. But its difficulty is also high. I stopped short of very high for this difficulty because it was actually easier than I was anticipating. It was the first map that I ever used watercolors on for the sketches, of course, because it was obvious that they needed something a little bit extra. And it was not as painful as I thought it would be, but it's not a walk in the park either. And as for its usefulness, I'm divided. On the one hand, yes, it's only useful for one specific location and only really once. But on the other hand, it is the perfect style to use as a handout for your players. If they're heading somewhere specific and alien and you want to give them a map, this is absolutely perfect. So rather than a low, medium, high score, I'm going to put specific. Out of 10, I give it a 7. We've come to a classic style, the old city block street map. It's a staple if you want a city map, and this is quick and easy to do and still imply or include a bunch of details. It's based on the concept of blocks of houses so that the alleyways and the roads are easy to delineate and label, and you can symbol the buildings to show their contents. When you're doing this style, have a bit of practice beforehand to get a feel for the kind of geometric patterning that you need. Add in a lot of alleyways, change the sizes of the blocks from the poor areas to the rich areas, and always label before you ink the blocks out to avoid crowding your map. It's a classic, like vanilla ice cream, because it's useful even if it's not exciting. For its aesthetic, for that very reason, I'll give it a medium. Yes, it's not as strange and different as some of the other styles that we're talking about here, but it is still cool to look at. But the important part is that its difficulty is low. This is something that shouldn't give you too much trouble, even if you're very new to this. You may make a couple of mistakes or do things that you'll want to change, but if you remember my advice from before, the alleys, the block sizes, label first, then you'll make something that you're happy with. and its usefulness is high. You can base an entire campaign in a city if you want an urban fantasy vibe, and if you make an A3 or an A2 map, label the roads and the alleys, add in some sites of interest, and have symbols and insights galore, it's possibly one of the most practical maps on this list so far. I'd give this map style a 7 out of 10, and if you want more advice or insight, I've done 2 videos on this channel so far on this style, the Smug Rock map and the Liverpool map. This is a great time to remind you all that if you're enjoying this video, please like it below to help the algorithm, and even subscribe if you want more of this content. But moving forward, here's the other classic on this list, the delicious chocolate ice cream to the city block styles vanilla. The classic realm map, such as I did in a great deal of my early videos to highlight world building concepts, and the one that I will no doubt come back to. In this case, this is the map of the Rostovani peoples where I talked about creating cultures in your maps and made little illustrations. The style here is multicolored fine liner inks, and there's a variety of different, if minor, aesthetic changes for you to personalize your own maps, different ways of drawing coastlines or forests or cities, etc. This is the basic map, and it's perhaps the most accessible and useful kind of map in fantasy. People love this kind of map, game masters and players alike, because its aesthetics are good. I'll give it a medium. It's also moderately easy to achieve. I'll set its difficulty to medium because it can be quite time consuming to do it well and fill it with details. And of course, it's very useful. That's a high in usefulness. As the delicious go-to in the ice cream bar of the cartography world, this realm style gets a solid 7.5 out of 10. There's a lot to say about it, and I've made a few videos focusing on this style, but I'll be coming out with an updated one to streamline my process and advice in the coming weeks. The Symbolic map. Honestly, I feel as someone who loves maps that this didn't get enough love. I'm also going to give a shout out to the coded map here for the same reason, but the Symbolic map of the Isle of Dreams is something that's visually striking, usable as the basis for an adventure, and something that you can give to your players for them to puzzle over. And isn't that what we're all here for? To torment our players? To make this map was a more involved process than usual. For this video, I wanted to highlight the amount of time it took me for different sizes of maps, so I did 3 versions of the same map. Having made one normal map, I could then make the Symbolic map. I drew the island as a bird using color to indicate topography, and then wrote a story around it hinting at the locations of significance. Aesthetically, it's high. So high, in fact, that it sacrificed some of its usefulness as an actual map in the pursuit of being cool. But that's no issue for the veteran game master. However, its difficulty is also high, quite apart from the process, which involves actually making 2 maps so that you can use the first as a reference for the second. You need to put quite a lot of thought into it for the maximum effect. I'm putting its usefulness as medium, because while it does sacrifice its actual usability for symbolism, it's useful for the game master to give out as a puzzle. Overall, 8 out of 10, fight me, I love it. Alright, we're going to come forward to one of the more recent Naturalist map, the standout of the recent series, the old-fashioned book-styled map of the Underdark. What makes it book-styled and old-fashioned? I'll tell you. This style is very similar to the normal classic realm map, but with one major restriction. It cannot use color. Instead, I've used 5 thicknesses of black fine liner pens to ink the symbols, labels, and topography, and I've even used some grayscale watercolors for the fauna in the corners. What makes this style different enough that it deserves its own category and score from the classic realm map? I'll tell you. Its aesthetics are the same as the realm. With extra detail given to the symbols and labeling to make up for a lack of color, it levels up its appeal. What's more, the style in black and white is something that lends itself more to having been created within a fantasy world, and with the right weathering has an added level of immersion, which takes it from a medium to a high. However, it requires high drawing skills and a great deal more patience. It takes longer, it demands hand-eye coordination, and it's easier to make mistakes in, so its difficulty also increases from medium to high. It's still very useful, and what's more, the added immersion gives it a slight edge. It's still high, and in the end the changes are enough to give it a whole point more in the score. 8.5 out of 10. We're getting to the good stuff now. We're onto the maps that I genuinely enjoy doing and I really enjoy looking at. So we're getting back to the map of Old Gvan Lars Hall, my sketch of the lair of Axabar the Vain. This video is focused on how you can create maps that are usable as handouts for your campaigns and how they can add to the experience. In the end, I didn't talk as much about the style as I should have done, but I will now. It was a very easy style to do for how good it looks. A quick pencil sketch of the layout, mostly rubbed out to stop it showing, followed by using a watercolor outline before inking a harder cabin wall. I followed up with some sketches and notes to add to its usefulness in a campaign. I won't lie, I love this map. I would get this framed, except I don't want all of the other maps that I make to get jealous. Its aesthetics are, for me, through the roof. It would look amazing in the front of a book or on your wall, all weathered and given to your players. It's a high. And what's more, it was shockingly low difficulty. The sketches took a bit more skill and practice, but they aren't strictly necessary. The sketch of the dragon is almost taken directly from the monster manual for Dungeons & Dragons. And its usefulness is enough that you could make it for a campaign. You couldn't make something like this for every campaign, but you could make a whole campaign focused on a map like this. I'll give it a medium, to be fair. Overall, I'm in love. 9 out of 10. Every week, I make a new map, and every week I think to myself, that's actually not bad. And perhaps it's just my continued surprise that my experiments turn out well, but the last map I've made has topped this list. This is the isolinear layered city map, the Undercity of Eglarond. It's a setting in my own campaign, and the references are a good deal of the things that my players have already encountered. For this rating, we'll ignore the Naturalist sketches and the borders, which are included in a great many of the more recent maps. To make this style, you need to measure out the layers that you want and then make the layers trapezoidal to give the impression of the isolinear style. In pencil, sketch out the lines of the roads and the landmarks on the surface, the bubbles and the connecting lines of tunnels in the underground, and then label. If you ink the labels first, followed by the landmarks and the caverns, then you can do the lines of the tunnels and use simple geometrics to imply the buildings. It's not very detailed in terms of the surface level, but you get, in this case, 4 times the coverage. I've also used watercolors, that's not strictly necessary. For its aesthetic, this is the only map on the list that I will give a very high. Maybe I'll feel differently in the future, but that's where I am at for now. It's got a low for its difficulty. It's fairly simple, even if it's time consuming, and the amount of effort that you put in definitely pays off. And it's fairly useful. I'll give it a medium. If you make it large enough and add enough details, it's as useful as, or more useful than, the classic city block style. I'd give this map style a 9.5 out of 10. And there we have it. The top 10 map styles for your campaigns. If you want to take your maps to the next level, to immerse your players, to give yourself and your game an edge that you may be missing, you can use one of these different maps. And what do you think? What will you give a go? Thank you once again to everyone who's watching. I'm so happy to be able to create these maps and these videos, and they're getting better all the time. If you like what I do and you're interested in helping to support me so that I can keep making them, then please consider becoming a member of the Red Quills, either here on YouTube or on my Patreon. The links are in the description. If you have questions about the styles, you can check out the videos in question or comment below. I'm always happy to help out where I can. Good luck out there, and I'll see you next time.